All right. What's up, everybody? This is Brandon Lindsay with the Rehabbers Playbook. Super excited to be here with Kim McFaline. I always get the last name. I'm still
Okay,
working on it. But Kim is a great friend, even though I struggle with her last name.
that's
And
okay.
and Kim has been a TRP member for since spring of 2024. She won it at an auction at Dealmaker, which is my favorite real estate event. And ever since then, she's just been such a core part to the Rehabbers Playbook community. So much so that I'm going to introduce her to the world right now as one of our TRP captains, which means she is one of our handful of people who we really recognize as people who lead this group, lead this community. They're go-givers, they're constantly giving back, and they lead it with passion and enthusiasm, which you're really going to see today in this conversation that Kim leads everything with. So, Kim, say hi to the call or to the YouTube channel, whatever you want to call it.
I'm so grateful to be here, honored. I do get emotional in my later years, so bear with me. I'm so grateful for you, Brandon. I'm grateful for the group. Grateful to be here. Honored to be a captain. So I accepted that. Yes, I accepted the role. And here we are. Here we are
Amazing.
on a call, right?
I'm so excited to have you. So excited to have you as a captain. And this is a new thing we're doing for our YouTube channel. Who knows where else we put out this content, but it's just conversations with TRP members about what I think they bring to not only the community, but just the industry altogether, right? And Kim, I think you bring, again, I'll say it again, great passion to this business. A lot of people talk, it's really easy to gripe in this business. I'm sure you've been in that position. We all have. I just got off the phone. We talked before this call about me losing my cool today, which is very rare, but it happens in this business. But regardless, passion is what really I like to drive us in this business. And you really bring that because it's fueled by your story.
Yes.
And that's what I want to talk about today. We're not doing these hour-long podcasts or conversations. I want to really get into what I find the TRP members who jump on these calls, what I find to be unique and valuable about them and what they bring to the industry, like I said. So let's jump right into it. And I'll probably butt in, and ask questions and everything. But I'd really like you to open up as much as you feel comfortable about your story and about how that relates to what you do as a rehabber and a future builder. I'm already speaking
Yes.
it into existence.
Yes.
Um, but I'd love you to just peel back the curtain as much as you feel comfortable, because I know a little bit about it, and I think it's amazing, and it's definitely something people should know about you.
Well, I've always been transparent. I think transparency, honesty is part of who I am and my integrity. And so January 1st, 2005, I was restored. And I say that because I was at a place for many years before that where I was lost, confused, didn't have any self-worth. Um, Honestly, I think back now and I say God saved me so many times uh from horrible situations that I put myself into.
Amen.
And yes, and I'm sure there were days and times that he just went like, "What is this girl doing?" But he never gave up on me and he restored me and I am forever indebted to him for that.
Mm.
And so I was that lost young girl who had given up on herself and God said, "Well, here you are, my sweet child, and I'm not giving up on you." And so that brought me to a place where once I was on solid ground again and I was clear-headed and I knew that my life was worth more than what I was, doing to myself.
Hmm.
And I knew that God was always around, even in the grips of my addiction, even in the grips of my, insanity. I always knew God was there. He always showed me signs. And so throughout that process, I knew that something bigger than myself was always around me, even when I truly had given up on myself. And so when I finally, surrendered, and surrendering is not a bad word. I
Oh,
learned that
it's
surrendering
the
is
key.
is the key, is the absolute key to freedom. And when I surrendered on January 1st, that was my New Year's resolution. And, how many of us stick to New Year's resolutions,
Wow. Yeah, you're one
right?
of the was there's great percentages on that you definitely I think it's what like 5% or something like that
Right?
make it even now the first month or something you've made it what
20 years.
2005? Wow.
20 years. Yep. 20 years
Amazing.
and some change. And so, uh, which brought me to where I am today. And so my parents were second generation Italians. They came here, not came here. When they grew up, they came from big families and they dropped out of school early on. My
Mm.
mom, I think, was in the sixth grade. My dad was in the eighth or the ninth grade. And so they dropped out of school to take care of their family. They had a lot of siblings. And so they were always a couple that worked hard. They had like these laborious jobs. They delivered telephone books back in the day. My father became a carpenter and worked in the union for a while. My mom sewed hand sewed ties for Chanel, like hand sewed them. 144 dozen a week. That's what she would hand sew. Insanity,
You
but
said
she did
144
44
dozen.
dozen
Okay, I can't
a
do that
week.
math, but I
Right.
know it's a
A
lot.
whole lot, right? A whole lot. And so that was what she would do in the evening after they delivered telephone books during the day. And
Hmm.
so I learned early on that I wanted more. I was the
Sure.
fourth child, the baby out of
Hmm.
four girls, the first one to ever finish college, go to college and finish with a degree that I barely ever used, but anyway,
Sure.
I did it.
Does any of us, yeah,
Right.
do any
And
of us?
so it is what it is. But I accomplished that goal. And then I had lost my way in between that. And then, I surrendered and got clean and started a new life and got married. My husband, my boyfriend at the time, he's my husband now. He went through that whole dilemma with me, and so he always stuck by me, which is
Amazing.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're together 23 years. But long story short, um my dad got sick and he passed away. We took care of him and he passed away. And my
Yeah.
mom wanted me to sell their house. And so I sold it. And she gave each one of us a little inheritance. And so I wanted to make her proud and I wanted to make my pop proud. And I said, they worked all of their lives to pay off a house, right? So that it's free and clear. And here she is selling it and she wants to give us all a piece of that. What am I going to do with that money? Right?
Hmm.
What like I need to show her because she's still alive, and I need to show my pop, even though he's no longer physically here, that I did something with that hard-earned money that they gave me. And so I invested in my first short-term rental at the Jersey Shore. That was my first.
And when
That was
was this?
um well, we went into contract February of 2020. So
Okay,
right
so
before COVID
recent.
hit,
Okay, got
right?
it.
Right
Got
before
it.
COVID hit. And then COVID hit in March and everything went crazy. And so we opened up in July of that year and we rented to family and friends. And I still have that little cottage. That little cottage that we paid
It's cute.
200,000
I know
for
it. Yeah.
is
That's the
worth
one I know, right?
550, right? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was my first investment, and my mom got to see that before she passed away. I
Oh,
brought her.
amazing.
She was like, I never have to worry about you. I knew that you would always do something great, and
Mm.
she would always tell me I was a butterfly. She would say, when your wings are closed and clipped, you don't blossom. But when you open up those wings, you can do anything. And
Well said.
yeah, she was always the mom that would say to me, "You're a female, but that doesn't mean you can't do what males do.
Oh, sure.
And do anything, and I'm 50." So she would say this to me when I was 7 and 8, you
Yeah.
know, and so she would say, you can do anything you want to do. And because I was the last one born and my dad didn't have any boys, I kind of took on that role a little bit with him. So I was like on the bowling team, the father and son bowling team with him.
Hmm.
Like to play sports a lot to show him that, I was able to do it. And he taught me a lot of carpentry skills. So I can
Okay.
build
Yeah.
a lot of different things. I've done a lot of projects on my own.
Well,
Um,
I can tell through your products because that's not the only project I've seen of yours. You have a lot of great projects. And the thing about being good at design, which really shows through pictures and everything and videos that you have, is you also need to understand how it gets put together. You can't
Yes.
just say, it's where some designers go wrong. You can't just say, oh, that wall needs, let's do this and that. Like a really dumb example would be let's take down that wall and they don't know that you have to check for the load, right?
Sure.
But and that's usually pretty common, but you get the picture, right? So I can tell that with you that you know more beyond just the great designs that you put together, but you know about the construction elements, which is huge. And speaking of women in our group too, not to bring it back to the group, but you are part of such a great group of rehabbers and builders we have in the group. And it's really cool to see you guys just crush it in this business. You're
I
such a
have
good
to say,
example for it.
well, thank you. I have to say, when you have the right team in place, I mean, the sky's the limit. Well,
Sure.
actually, the sky isn't the limit. You can go above and beyond.
Yeah, that's right.
I have a great project manager who designs a lot of my stuff.
Okay.
Um, down south. I do a lot of the stuff up here, and then we kind of work together. And I have a great contractor. And so
Mm,
it took me 5 years to get to this place, right? But we sit down as a team and we just go through everything. Sometimes my design may not be what they feel is right. Sometimes what they bring up I don't feel is right, but we always come to a common ground where we know that it's all about what we want to put together. And because I've been restored, I look at these old homes, especially older homes. I have a love-hate relationship with historical homes.
yep.
We know that those historical homes built in the 1800s, early 1900s are just forget about the electric, right, and the plumbing. But now I've learned that I take that into consideration, and I just increase my budget, 25% more because we never know what's going to happen when we open up walls. But these historical homes that have been sitting there for 20, 30, 40 years in distress. Some of them, like the one we just finished in Columbus, it was sitting there for 20 years. And so it could have been a tear down, but we chose to save it. And so I look at these houses and I look at them and I envision what they look like back in the day. And I envision what families were back in the day. And if I can
Amazing.
find the history of the families that lived there and put the pieces together, um, I like to create a story about it and what
Sure.
we can save, right? As much as we can save. Sometimes we can't save much, sometimes we can save a lot. And I like to put it back together and bring something that was once so beautiful that now is, in disrepair, bring it back to life and allow the property to speak to me. So that's a new thing that we've been doing.
Well, what's really what I'm thinking about as you're saying that is knowing that there was a point that it was beautiful, right? And the symmetry with this and your story is so cool. It's beautiful in itself because I I think there's a lot of things that I can relate to with you also. And I think we all can remember a place where we were innocent and beautiful before maybe some bad things happen in our lives. Right?
Yes.
So how cool is that? I mean, does that make sense to you as well?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. These houses that have been neglected, I neglected myself when I
Hmm.
was in a really bad time in my life. And I look at these houses and I say, it's no fault of their own, right? It's no fault of their own that they're being neglected. And I realize that that's part of my story too. Like a lot of the stuff I had done or I had gone through was no fault of my own.
Hmm.
So I look at these houses and I want to give them so much love because
Right.
that's what they need.
Hmm.
That's what they need. They just need someone to come in and believe in them.
That's
And
right.
so that's what we do. That's what I do.
And the symmetry also between, we know the difference in this business between like a historical home, which is going to take some work, and like a cosmetic rehab, right?
Right.
And there's a difference in our personal lives with how far down the rabbit hole did we end up going,
Oh,
right? And was it just a cosmetic rehab in our lives, or was it a full gut renovation, right? But there's something really cool about the full gut renovation that you can start from scratch almost, right?
yes,
It's that idea of, was it when you hit rock bottom, at least you hit a foundation? It's
correct.
the same idea, right? I mean, does that speak to you as
Oh,
well?
yeah,
These are things that are just popping up, but yeah.
absolutely. I mean, hitting rock bottom was the best thing that ever happened to me. And so you're right. When you look at these homes, if you have to take it down to the bare foundation, that's okay. You're
Hmm.
going to build something beautiful. This last house we did, there was a realtor who was really upset that we couldn't save the hardwood floors. And as much as we wanted to, believe me, it was so difficult to have to pull it up. We had no other choice, and it broke my heart. But
Mm,
we made sure that we put down luxury hardwood floors to replace that. And so we had to
sure.
compensate. But, you know, I take a lot of this with a lot of when I look at a house, I take a lot into consideration. And obviously a budget is, the consideration as well. But, I've gone over budget and I'm okay with that.
Right.
If that means that I take it
Kim,
to
who has not gone over budget?
right, right. We don't speak about
Who's
that.
come under budget? Yeah, that's right.
We don't speak about that enough, or we don't
Yeah,
speak about the hardships going through it, right? Sometimes I
sure.
break down walls and I'm like, why would I do this, right?
Mm,
Or I say this, the insanity, right? Why am I doing this again when I'm going through it? Like the meaning of insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting different results,
sure. We've
right?
all been there.
Right.
Yeah,
And then I put it back together and I'm like, oh, let's do this again. Like this was great.
right.
Um, but so yes, I look at the house, I look at the rehab budget, I try to maintain the integrity of the home. And I know I briefly spoke about this, but I do speak to the home. I know it sounds crazy, but
It's not.
I've learned that the house itself has its own story. And so if I can walk in and allow that story to be told to me, whichever way the house tells me, and we work together, I've learned that things flow a lot better. I know it's crazy, but
It's
they do.
not. I think it might only be crazy to people who don't know the business, and maybe it's crazy to people who do. I think that's fair, potentially, but um, I think as you're talking about speaking to the house, you're also speaking to a lot of people who agree with you,
Yeah,
because there's energy in this world. I mean, we're starting to get into woo-woo land, but I agree. It's like there's energy in this world and everything kind of has its own energy in these houses. You cannot deny they have their own energy to them,
sure. The history
because they've
itself,
had a history, especially
right?
these historic homes. We relate on historic homes a lot too, because in Richmond, it's like every house in Churchill and Northside, so you're constantly thinking like, where was this house before? What family lived here before? What stories happened here? What kids were brought home here? What grandparents met their kids for the first grandkids for the first time. All those things are really cool to think about. So I like where you're going with that. I think that's really cool. Yeah.
And we
And
pray on it.
important.
Yes, and we pray on it.
Sure.
So
Of course.
each house that we look at, we pray on it and we ask God to show us whether or not this is a house that we can help, or if it's a house that we have to pass on.
Right.
And so we've just recently incorporated that. And then once we get it under contract, we say another prayer. And then my contractor, my project manager, and I will walk the house and we'll say more prayers and we'll ask for guidance. And it's worked for us. It may be a little woo-woo for people, but
Well, prayer definitely shouldn't be, and that's
oh,
kind of where I was saying energy and prayer, all that stuff, I think is all under the same umbrella. There's
absolutely.
so much power in prayer. And, I think this podcast, I'll never call this a podcast. This conversation can go definitely in that direction, because that's a big part of my life too. And surrendering is a big part of my life. Everything changed when I completely surrendered. I would repeat a prayer, speaking a prayer every single day, where I say, God, I surrender to you. Take
Mm,
my life and do what you need to do with it.
Serenity
Right?
prayer.
That's right. And so I like that. And I like that you pray over your houses. We do the same. I pray over way more. I pray over pretty much anything. So yeah, that's amazing. And one other thing that I was thinking about with your story, I didn't even think of so many parallels and symmetries with what we're talking about. But you were saying, you had to take out the hardwood of this house, right?
Yeah.
And you had to put back in new hardwood, but for some reason that's kind of a scar on an old home, right? You
Yeah.
want that original thing. It's almost as if you got sick and your body got sick and you had to replace a organ or something.
Right.
Forgive me for bad
Right.
analogies, but that's kind of
No.
the idea
Yeah.
I'm thinking. And something about those scars also makes sure that you never go back to that place.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
That's
yes.
that's kind of something that I'm thinking of as well as I hear your story in these historic homes and the symmetry there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. We did keep the windows. It
See,
did cost
and then
me
there's some things
7,000.
you look at that you
Right.
don't damage enough. Right,
Right. It
exactly.
cost me 7,000 for one window to replace because it's 15 feet high and
Mm,
3 feet wide, but it had to be wood, it had to it had to be the same as the other ones for the historical society.
sure.
But the new house that we just got under contract is not in the historical district, but is an historical home, and it's attached to the Prohibition period.
Oh,
So
wow.
history, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so I'm excited to dig deeper and see how much history this one has and what I can find on it. And
sure.
we're excited. We're excited to be doing this one. The building code inspector called me because this is on the Alabama side. So it's my first time interacting with him, and he's just so excited that we're coming in to revitalize this home. And
That's
so we're
good.
hoping to get the one next door that is a tear down, but I don't mind tearing it down. Well, I mind tearing it down, but it's literally falling apart. So we're hoping to see if we can work with the owner on that one. As much as it would be horrible to watch it be torn down. I think it needs to be put down because it's existing. Let's just say that. The
Sure.
roof is caved in, the porch is caved in, the backside of the house is completely done. It was a squatting, hoarding situation. But so we're working on that one as well. And if I can relieve the owner of the pain he's going through by holding on to it, I'm all for that as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
let's kind of talk about those next steps in your life and in your journey. I want to put in this description for the video, you have a great website and landing page, so people who want to invest with you, work with you, that's going to be a great place for them to go. And they'll be able to see some of your projects there, right?
yes, so
Yeah,
I have always
she's got great
self-funded.
projects. You have
Thank you.
amazing projects.
Oh, thank you. I have always self-funded my deals. So that small little inheritance that my parents gave me,
It's gone a long
have
way.
created, right, I have created a way to, fix them, flip them or keep them and pull my money
Mhm.
back out. And so I was always afraid to borrow from people. My rationale was I don't mind losing my own money, but if I lose someone else's, that's terrible.
It's not a
That's
bad thing to
terrible.
have. Yeah,
Right.
it
That would be
just
terrible.
you have to have a balance to it, of
Correct.
course. Right.
And
Yeah.
so going to Dealmaker and meeting a lot of people, a lot of lenders too, they said, well, listen, we take on that risk too. So don't feel like you would be losing money. We have to analyze the risk. We have to make sure it's
Underwrite it.
right. We have to
Good
underwrite it.
point. Yeah.
Right. And so it made me think of it a little bit differently. And they had asked me, have you ever lost some of your own money? And I've said I have. And they said, well, what would you do to make it right? And if you borrowed, what would you do to make it right? And I said straight out, if I had to refinance my own primary house to pay somebody back, I would. And they were like, well, then, that's your answer. You have properties, you have equity, you have investment properties. You need to start growing and expanding and using other people's money. If they're willing to lend it to you because they feel the deal is right, why would you not do that?
Well, one of the best things that Jim does at the Dealmaker conferences, and one of the best things that you can just do in general is listen to, well, Jim puts up like a lender panel, right? And you get to hear them talk. When you hear them talk, they don't talk about we're never expecting our borrowers to ever not lose money, right? We don't expect them to always hit home runs, but we expect them to communicate and solve problems. And that does put it into a different perspective, certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm not as afraid. So I do take on I am now starting to take on lenders, which I think is
Mm,
great. But I also know this, Brandon, from me myself. Comparison is the thief to joy, right? To all joy. So
yeah.
I stopped comparing myself to where other people are, and I'm staying in my own lane. I know what I'm capable of doing, and I know not to over leverage. And if that means doing 1 to 2 projects a year, I'm okay with that.
Very smart of you.
Yeah.
And we talked about this yesterday on our TRP call, didn't we? And Trevor
Yeah.
brought it up and we were talking about it. I think it's what really binds us as a group too, is knowing that we don't compare comparison is not only the thief of joy, but it's potentially the cause of all your problems, you know.
Absolutely.
And when you're really trying to stretch things too much and um, you know, take on more than you can chew, right? Bite more than you can chew. That's where a lot of problems happen. That's where you end up with the stories in the newspaper, or you hear about the contractors who aren't getting paid by so and so, and all those things that hurt your reputation, that hurt your relationships, that hurt your joy in the business, which is one of the biggest
Absolutely.
things. You know, you got to keep the joy. And I was at a point where I was at one point doing a lot more than I do now. I would never go back to it. I don't care
Yeah.
how much money I was making back then. I'd rather run a good business, increase my profit margin, do it responsibly, and just keep it going for a long period of time instead of um, going up so fast and then burning out so fast. You know,
Yeah.
that's the difference.
I'm a firm believer in quality over quantity. I like to work on one or two projects and really put a lot of quality into it, a lot of patience, a lot of effort, a lot of love, and give a home to a deserving family or keep it, right? If I decide to keep it. And so for me, I know if I over leverage or if I spread myself thin, something is going to suffer, and it's going to be the quality,
And you.
right? And so I don't want
And
that.
your stress. Yeah,
Right? My
exactly.
stress, and then everyone suffers, right? Because when you're building something,
Yep.
something else suffers from that, right? So there has to be that balance. And for me, I don't want my family suffering. I don't want to be, I don't want to be impatient with them
Hmm.
because my projects are, I'm overflowing with projects and I can't get a hold of them. So for me, I know staying in my lane, doing one or two projects a year, at this point in the stage of my life, I'm okay with, because then everyone is happy. My kids are happy, my husband's happy, my family is happy, my project manager is happy, my contractor, he may not be so happy. He'd like to do more projects,
Are
but
they
he
ever
knows that.
happy? Yeah,
Right. He knows that I will always take care of him. I mean, he
right.
literally just sent me a text message last week and said, Miss Kim, you are the only one that has always paid me on time. And I learned that from you, Brendan. Pay your contractors on time. When you say you're going to pay them, you pay them
Yep.
as long as the work is done, right? And he said to me, you're the only one that's ever paid me on time. You're the only one that's really listened to me and, has always been there for me. And even when we had some miscommunication, we always brought it right back in. And I would always tell my team, communication is 1000% top priority. Tell me what's going on. I don't want to hear, don't worry about it. We'll try to cut corners elsewhere. Just tell me what the issue is and let's fix it. And we can move on. And so I think that says a lot, but I've learned that in your group. I remember you saying, from a contractor's perspective, take care of them. If you say you're going to pay them as long as the work is done. And that always sat with me. And I tell you, Brendan, every Friday when we would go through the scope of work and what was done, I would be going to the bank and wiring him money
Yeah.
because he has a business too.
It is potentially the biggest cheat code that is undercover. People think it's so simple, right? It's like, oh, I'll pay them when I pay them, or that's not going to make that big a difference. It makes all the difference in the world. Contractors are already stretched thin. They have so much overhead and expenses, and their heads in the field and in the office, and their job is not easy. Like
No,
a contractor's job is actually really difficult. In my opinion, one of the hardest. I mean, I've wholesaled, I've flipped, I've been a landlord, I've done creative finance. I can name a bunch of different things I've done. Built new construction, um, contracting. I was a contractor at some point, still feel like I am from time to time. Um, Hardest thing there is. And the only thing I do if I'm a contractor now, if I help people out, I help people in the group that I know who are going to pay me on time and pay me well and understand what I'm worth. Not every contractor gets that benefit. Now, it's
no.
because there are bad contractors out there,
Yes.
and not paying contractors on time gets rid of the bad one or good ones and attracts the bad ones. So it's that law of attraction that you always have to worry about as well. It's a
And there's a loyalty that comes
ecosystem.
with that.
Sure.
My contractor, even though we may not be, we just went into contract, so we have something lined up for him. But for the last 2 or 3 months, I had nothing lined up for him. And you know what? It's the loyalty. And if I text him and say, "Hey, can you go look at a project for me?" and he goes, and let's just say we don't follow through, I always pay him for his time. And he
Yeah.
told me, "You're the only one that sends me money for going to a job site to give you a bid on. No one else does that." And I realized that his time is worth something, right? If I'm asking him to go look at a project for me that we wind up not going through with, he still went there and did a scope of work for me and did a budget for me, and why would I not pay him for that? And he said I am the only one, which then brings me to this. He said, "I will always be loyal to you, Miss Kim. Whatever projects you have lined up, I will put things aside and I will get yours done."
And
And
that's
that goes a long way.
That's the most valuable asset you can have in the business is a good relationship with a contractor. You can do almost anything when you have that. And it
Yes,
goes back to, I mean, I answer 50% or more of people's questions about contractors with what my first mentor told me about this business is money talks. That can mean a bunch of different things. Pay them
absolutely.
on time, pay them well. Um, don't that doesn't necessarily mean hold it over their head, but you can be respectful about incentivizing them with it.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a cheat code. So if you get anything out of this call when it comes to actual practical advice, I'm really telling you guys, anybody who's watching, that could be one of the biggest cheat codes. And then once you build your team, that's everything. You've already said it. Your team is everything in this business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my project
Well,
manager, I can't give her enough credit. I mean, she oversees it all for
that's
me
your
because I'm
team.
not there. That's
Yeah.
my team. She's my right hand gal. She helps me with the design. She helps me with the layout. She goes and speaks to the contractor for me. They're a team in and of themselves as well.
That's right. Yeah.
I made sweatshirts for them. It's a funny story, real quick. I made sweatshirts for them. We learned along the process that his sweatshirt says, Mr. Don't worry about it, because we ran into a few issues and he would say, "Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it." And then we realized at the end of the project he couldn't just take care of it. So we
Yeah.
we increased our budget a little bit. And then Pam is my Miss Change It. Like, we look at a design and we change it, right? We change the tiles, we change the flooring, whatever. And then I'm misfunded because I'm just like, who do I gotta pay? And let's get it done.
I'll
And
tell you what, if you didn't look at the people behind those shirts and you just put those shirts together, that's a A+ team right there. You got
yes,
the money, you got the now to change it, you got to make sure we don't get carried away, of
right.
course. But
Yeah.
I know she's great. I've seen what she's put together and you're always giving her praise. And that's another key to building a great team is you're a leader and everybody's got to have their own kind of leadership in the group too. But you got to give credit where credit's due. It's not all about you, it's about the team. It's
And
about the
here,
project.
this is what I'll end with too. Don't keep your contractors and project managers to yourself. That
Mm,
scarcity mindset is not going to get you anywhere. Like, give them credit, shout them out. It's okay if they get other projects with other investors. They'll always have loyalty to you
that's right.
if you do right by them.
Hmm.
You know, they have businesses, they have to feed their families. So if you just want to keep them to yourself and throw them one or two projects that may not be enough to cover their food on their table, give them shout outs. Let other investors use them.
That's right. Let them make the decision, right? I have
Absolutely.
contractors where I give referrals and I always tell the people I refer them to, I'm like, they've told me before they don't want to work for anybody. Like they have their clients, but you can give
Right?
them a shot, right? But let them
Absolutely.
make the decision because you're right. They should have the loyalty to you. And if they don't have the loyalty to you, that's just a good way of realizing that they're not loyal, right?
They're
I've
not
always
part of your
said that
team.
about friends and relationships in my life, just overall, is like give
Absolutely.
them the leash, and if they run away, then they run away, and that's
That's right.
that's one of the best ways to learn that they're not loyal. So,
Right.
Kim, it's been great. Why don't we, let you say any last words that you have here? By the way. One thing in my head, and I was going to write it down, and it's going to be weird for me to kind of piece this in at the end. But we were talking about, and this will kind of be how I end the call. But we were talking about how you only want to do a handful of projects a year. You don't want to do a bunch of projects. You don't want comparison to be the thief of joy. I'll tell you the difference and it's a common theme you see in the playbook community, and it's a something I'm so proud of the fact that we have people in this group like this. You're living a purpose-driven life, not like a money-focused life, or not like a
No.
spectacle focused life. And I think that's the difference between people who want to show off and do too much and people who just want to do what they can do and do it right. So, that's what you do. That's what you are. I've appreciated everything about you sharing your story and being vulnerable. And why don't I give you the last words? Any last words that you have here?
Follow your dreams. Whatever you want to do in life, you can do, as long as you have faith. Faith is a
Amen.
big thing for me, right?
Mhm.
You can, and you're never, it's never too late. Like I am a perfect example of God restoring me and bringing me to this place right now where I am.
Mhm.
Does it take footwork? Yes. A saying that we use in recovery, right? You're responsible for the footwork and not the outcome. If you put the footwork in, the
Mm.
outcome is yours.
Well
It's
said.
there for the
I
taking.
like that. Yeah,
So thank you. Thank you for having me.
of
I am
course.
so honored and grateful to be here amongst you and the whole community that you have built. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this takes off for you and for us as a group.
I'm excited too. I think we have a lot of big things in the future. And one thing we cannot miss is Kim runs Dealmaker New Jersey. Dealmaker is a group that I highly, highly recommend by my good friend and mentor, Jim Ingersoll. But he's got all these different locations now. He's got like 50 or whatever it is. So
God
Kim
bless.
runs the New Jersey one. So look out for her. I'll have her information in the chat. Kim, God bless. Thank you so much for everything. If you ever need me, you can always reach out, and I'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Have a great day.
You
Thank you
too.
for having me.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.